shloke bhaktir bhavati na ishtikhi. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text 25. Nabhihridam bhuvanakosha guhodarastam yatratmayoni dishanakila loka padmam vyudam harinmani vrishastanayoramushya Dhyayedvayam vishadahara mayuka gauram Nabhihridam bhuvanakosha guhodarastam Yatratmayoni dishanakila loka padmam Vyudam harinmani vrishastanayoramushya Dhyayedvayam vishadahara mayuka gauram Nabhihridam bhuvanakosha guhodarastam Word-to-word meaning. Nabhihridam, the navel lake. Bhuvanakosha, of all the worlds. Guha, the foundation. Udara, on the abdomen. Stam, situated. Yatra, where? Atmayoni, of Brahma. Dishana, residence. Akila Loka, containing all planetary systems. Padmam, lotus. Vyudam, sprang up. Haritmani, like emeralds. Vrisha, most exquisite. Stanayo, of nipples. Amushya, of the Lord. Dhyayet, he should meditate on. Dvayam, the pair. Vishada, white. Hara, of pearl necklaces. Mayuka, from the light. Gauram, whitish. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The yogi should then meditate on his moon-like navel in the center of his abdomen. From his navel, which is the foundation of the entire universe, sprang the lotus stem containing all the different planetary systems. The lotus is the residence of Brahma, the first created being. In the same way, the yogi should concentrate his mind on the Lord's nipples, which resemble a pair of most exquisite emeralds and which appear whitish because of the rays of the milk white pearl necklaces adorning his chest. Purport. The yogi is advised next to meditate upon the navel of the Lord, which is the foundation of all material creation. Just as a child is connected to his mother by the umbilical cord, so the firstborn living creature Brahma, by the supreme will of the Lord, is connected to the Lord by a lotus stem. In the previous verse, it was stated that the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, who engages in massaging the legs, ankles, and thighs of the Lord, is called the mother of Brahma. But actually, Brahma is born from the abdomen of the Lord, not from the abdomen of his mother. These are inconceivable conceptions of the Lord, and one should not think materially. How can the father give birth to a child? It is explained in the Brahma Samhita that each limb of the Lord has the potency of every other limb. Because everything is spiritual, his parts are not conditioned. The Lord can see with his ears. The material ear can hear but cannot see. But we understand from the Brahma Samhita that the Lord can also see with his ears and hear with his eyes. Any organ of his transcendental body can function as any other organ. His abdomen is the foundation of all the planetary systems. Brahma holds the post of the creator of all planetary systems, but his engineering energy is generated from the abdomen of the Lord. Any creative function in the universe always has a direct connecting link with the Lord. The necklace of pearls which decorates the upper portion of the Lord's body is also spiritual, and therefore the yogi is advised to gaze at the whitish luster of the pearls decorating his chest. Umajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dhinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Lord Kapila Dev is going through the limb by limb meditation on the beautiful features of the Lord. So this section is common for both the Bhakti Yogis and the Ashtanga Yogis, where the Smaranam, the remembering and meditating, which is there in the Bhakti Yoga part, and the limb by limb meditation of the Ashtanga Yogis. So this part is common. And this kind of meditating on the different limbs of the Lord, for the Bhakti Yogis, it is recommended when it comes spontaneously in the Raganuga stage. That's how the Acharyas explain. Starting from the feet of the Lord, one is supposed to meditate on the feet for a long time. So that is why the first step in the sequence of meditations begins with Sanchintayed Bhagavatas Charanaravindam Vajrangushadvajas Saroruha Lanchanadyam Uttunga Rakta Vilasannaka Chakravala Joshnadi Birahata Mahat Hridayandakaram. The devotee should first concentrate his mind on the Lord's lotus feet, which are adorned with the marks of a thunderbolt, a gourd, a banner, and a lotus. The splendor of their beautiful ruby nails resembles the orbit of the moon and dispels the thick gloom of one's heart. So that's how the meditation begins. So one is asked to meditate on the feet of the Lord for a long time, so that one's ignorance in the material existence is removed. Then as described by the devotees who covered the set of verses, I remember Rajanath Prabhu mentioning about Lord Shiva, how he becomes more auspicious by carrying the water which is touched the Lord's lotus feet. Shiva Shivo Bhu. The auspicious Shiva becomes more auspicious by taking the water which is touched the feet of the Lord on his head. The blessed Lord Shiva becomes all more blessed by bearing on his head the holy waters of the Ganges, which has its source in the water that washed the Lord's lotus feet. The Lord's feet act like thunderbolts hurled to shatter the mountain of sin stored in the mind of the meditating devotee. One should therefore meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord for a long time. So it gives us an indication to gaze when we are taking darshan, to gaze at the feet of the Lord for a longer time before we move up. The yogi should fix in his heart the activities of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, who is worshipped by all demigods and is the mother of the Supreme Person Brahma. She can always be found massaging the legs and thighs of the Transcendental Lord, very carefully serving him in this way. So Mother Lakshmi is the embodiment of Pada Sevanam. The theme of not only seeing the Lord, but seeing the Lord in connection with his devotees. So he, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has a transcendental form and he has got his own abode, and he is not alone, he is surrounded by devotees. So the culture of respecting and worshipping the devotees of the Lord is also being brought out. Interestingly, in this section we will also see how the three major Sampradaya Acharyas are mentioned here. Mother Lakshmi, the origin of Sri Sampradaya, and Lord Brahma, the origin of Rudra Sampradaya, and Lord Brahma is mentioned in this, but today's verse is the origin of Brahma Sampradaya. Next, the yogi should fix his mind in meditation on the personality of Godhead's thighs, the storehouse of all energy. The Lord's thighs are whitish blue, like the luster of the linseed flower, and appear most graceful when the Lord is carried on the shoulders of Garuda. And the yogi should contemplate his rounded hips, which are encircled by a girdle that rests on the exquisite yellow silk cloth that extends down his ankles. So when the Lord wants to protect his devotees in distress, we see him flying in his Vahana, which is Lord Garuda. When trying to bless Dhruva Maharaj, when trying to bless Prithu Maharaj, when trying to restore Gajendra from a precarious condition, the Lord mounts on his carrier, Garuda. And when trying to save Garuda, it's described that, when trying to save Gajendra, it's described that he was in such a rush that he felt Garuda was not flying faster, and when he was rushing, when the upper part of his garment fell away, he didn't bother to even take it and put it back. He is displaying this Bhakta Vatsala quality of rushing to save his devotee. So that's how the prayers Madak Prapanna Pasupasha Vimokshanaya Muktaya Bhuri Karunaya Namolayaya. So that's how Gajendra prayed. Bhuri Karunaya. Then the next progression comes today, which is meditating on the moon-like navel in the center of his abdomen. Now the significance of the abdomen is being brought out. Udara. This is the foundation of the entire universe. From his navel, which is the foundation of the entire universe. So, Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita also mentions about he being the sthanam, the foundation. So here we get the details of that foundation, and that is coming from Garbhodakshai Vishnu's navel, from whose navel sprang the lotus stem containing all the planetary systems. The lotus is the residence of Brahma, the first created being. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport brings out the point of connection of Lord Brahma and that of Garbhodakshai Vishnu. Even though in the previous verse Mother Lakshmi is mentioned as the mother of Brahma, the Lord created Brahma from his own navel without the help of Mother Lakshmi. So that's the interesting point about the Lord has inconceivable potencies. So how can a father give birth to a child? So this is a material calculation. So in material world we have limitations in terms of time and place, and the rules which govern in the material world is one sense organ is connected to one sense object, and it is governed by a set of rules in the material world. So I can't take water and pour in my eyes and expect my thirst to be quenched. So these are rules. Sound is meant to enter through ears, vision is for the eyes. Similarly, you understand the whole sequence. So these rules govern the conditioned living beings. However, in the spiritual world, because there are no limitations, no restrictions, through the spiritual body, the Lord can function. The function of one particular limb can carry out the function of any other limb in the body. So that is how Srila Prabhupada explains. Because everything is spiritual, his parts are not conditioned. So conditioning applies. So conditioning applies only in the material world. In spiritual world there are no conditionings. Because there are no conditioning, one function of a particular organ can be performed by any other organ. So that's how Prabhupada puts it. Material ear can hear but cannot see. But we understand from Brahma Samhita that the Lord can also see with his ears and hear with his eyes. Any organ of his transcendental body can function as any other organ. So this particular verse which Srila Prabhupada is quoting is this Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti. Do you remember this verse? When do we sing this? Darshanat. So this brings out not only an esoteric concept of the Lord's beauty and his potency, but it also has a philosophical point, as Prabhupada explains in when he lectured on this Brahma Samhita section, that the Lord has no such limitations. The Lord can see through his ears and taste just by glancing, and that is why when the food is being offered by chanting the mantras, when the bhoga is offered, the pujari chants the set of mantras, then we request the Lord to honor the bhoga. So this procedure is done by chanting mantras, and Prabhupada says the Lord hears and accepts the offering, and through glancing he eats. So even though he is present in the spiritual world, he can extend his hand and take the food which is offered in any part of the world and eat. So this, Prabhupada says, we have a hand which is measured by a particular dimensions, by a particular length, but the Lord has got a hand which he can extend anywhere and everywhere, and that's how you see his hands and legs are everywhere. That's how Bhagavad Gita also describes. So through this inconceivable potency, the main ingredient in the offering is the love and devotion. When that is there, the Lord accepts it. And that's how Srila Prabhupada explains. In this particular verse from Brahma Samhita 5.32, the purport to this explains how the soul and the body of Krishna are identical, whereas the body and soul of the fallen creatures are not so. In the spiritual sphere, there is no such difference as that between the body and the soul, between the limbs and their proprietor, between the attributes and the objects possessing them of this world. Limbed though Krishna is, his every limb is the whole entity. He performs all varieties of divine spiritual functions with every one of his limbs. So this is how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains by giving purport to this particular verse. So he is Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. Ananda Chinmaya Sad Ujjvala Vigrahasya. And he is a person. And Lord Brahma is offering prayers to that person. Govindam Adi Purusham Tam Aham Bhajami. So I worship such a wonderful person who can see through his ears, hear through his nose, and all that sequence. So if you see, this is an interesting personality. So when we are trying to serve Krishna, when you offer him bhoga, he might be glancing, and simultaneously the content of the plate will reduce. So if you are dealing with such a person, it will be an interesting experience for you by having these kind of loving exchanges with the devotees. The Lord, as the reservoir of all pleasure, maintains the living entities in the spiritual world. Just as we have fallible and infallible living entities, those living entities in the spiritual world, the Lord maintains them by such loving exchanges and pastimes through his inconceivable potency. the bodily beauty of the Lord is being described by various other devotees in their prayers. So I just wanted to touch upon few sets of prayers where the bodily beauty of the Lord is described, especially that of the abdomen and the navel. The first set of prayers that came to my mind are that of Mother Kunti, when she offers this set of prayers to the Lord. First, she puts herself in a lower position. How can I know you perfectly? Because I am in the body of a woman. So this is 1.8.20. You yourself descend to propagate the transcendental science of devotional service unto the hearts of advanced transcendentalists and mental speculators who are purified by being able to discriminate between matter and spirit. How can we women know you perfectly? So the same mood which Mother Devahuti also exhibited in front of Lord Kapila, and asking questions and inquiries, putting forward. So the humble mood is brought out in that prayer. Tata paramahamsanam muninam amalatmanam bhakti yoga vidanartam katam pashye mahistriyah. After taking that lower position, the next set of prayers come which describe the Lord and His beauty. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopak Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Let me therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto the Lord, who has become the son of Vasudeva, the pleasure of Devaki, the boy of Nanda, and the other cowherd men of Vrindavana, and the enlivener of the cows and the senses. So in the next verse, so in this scenario, Lord Krishna spent time with the Pandavas and he is about to go back to Dwarka. But Mother Kunti, when the Lord is in his chariot and about to leave, she is offering this set of prayers and delaying the Lord's departure. And as we know, the Lord agrees to stay for few more weeks when requested by Yudhishthir Maharaj. So when Mother Kunti is taking darshan of the Lord, she did not want to embarrass the Lord by first glancing at his feet for a long period. So she started off by looking at from the navel onwards. So that's how Prabhupada writes it in that particular section, on that particular verse's purport. 1.8.22 Namah Pankajanabhaya Namah Pankajamaline Namah Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajangraye. Pankajanabhaya, unto the Lord who has a specific depression resembling a lotus flower in the center of his abdomen. So this particular verse describes the Lord's different parts and comparing them with lotus. My respectful obeisances are unto you, O Lord, whose abdomen is marked with a depression like a lotus flower, who are always decorated with garlands of lotus flowers, whose glance is as cool as the lotus, and whose feet are engraved with lotuses. Pankajanabhaya, Pankajamaline, Pankajanetraya, Pankajangraye. So that was one of the marks in the lotus feet of the Lord which the yogi is supposed to meditate, which was covered in the previous set of verses. So in that purport, Prabhupada brings about the mercy of the Lord, how these marks cannot be seen by material vision. But the Lord agrees to come down to the material world in the form of Archa Vigraha, so that the conditioned souls who are so much used to seeing only matter can also take advantage of meditating on the different limbs of the Lord. So the mercy of the Lord is manifested in the form of his Archa Vigraha. And by meditating on different limbs of the deity, you get the same benefit of taking his darshan. That's how Prabhupada writes. The Pankajanabi Lord accepts the Archa Vigraha as transcendental form in different elements, namely a form within the mind, a form made of wood, a form made of earth, a form made of metal, a form made of jewel, a form made of paint, a form drawn on sand, etc. All such forms of the Lord are always decorated with garlands of lotus flowers, and there should be a soothing atmosphere in the temple of worship to attract the burning attention of the non-devotees always engaged in material wranglings. Therefore, the Lord is merciful even to women, Shudras, Dvijabandhus, provided they agree to visit the temple of worship in different forms made for them. So there he writes, one should begin to see the Lord from his lotus feet, gradually rising to the thighs, waist, chest and face. One should not try to look at the face of the Lord without being accustomed to seeing the lotus feet of the Lord. Srimati Kunti, because of her being the aunt of the Lord, did not begin to see the Lord from the lotus feet, because the Lord might feel ashamed, and thus Kunti Devi, just to save a painful situation for the Lord, began to see the Lord just above his feet, that is, from the waist of the Lord, gradually rising to the face and then down to the lotus feet. So here Prabhupada is giving instructions on how to meditate on the different limbs of the deity for a sadhaka, and the mellow being exchanged between Mother Kunti and Lord Krishna. The next set of prayers which I wanted to focus on, which describe the navel of the Lord, is sung by Lord Shiva. Prayers offered by Lord Shiva, where he also describes very similar lines, 4, 24, 34, where he is offering obeisances to the Lord. The Rudra Gita, this set of verses are there. Very similar to what Mother Kunti sang. Namah Pankajanabhaya Bhuta Sukshmendriyatmane Vasudevaya Shantaya Kutastaya Swarochishe. This is Lord Shiva. He is saying, my Lord, you are the origin of the creation by virtue of the lotus flower which sprouts from your navel. You are the supreme controller of the senses and the sense objects, and you are also the all-pervading Vasudeva. You are most peaceful, and because of your self-illuminated existence, you are not disturbed by the 6 kinds of transformations. So in this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada focuses on how Garbhodakshayi Vishnu is the origin of all the senses and the sense objects, and through his mercy we can engage the senses properly in his service. Taking a very humble role, Lord Shiva also prays to the Lord that let my senses be engaged in your service. Because in this set of prayers, the description of one's chitta, one's mind, intelligence, false ego, all of that will be brought out. And in essence, Lord Shiva is praying that let my heart, chitta, be always focused on you. Let my mind focus on you. Let my intelligence focus on you. Let me give up my false ego and always be situated in my real ego as your servant. So, in that section, the Supreme Lord is known as Rishikesha, master of the senses, which indicate that our senses and sense objects are formed by the Supreme Lord. As such, he can control our senses and out of his mercy engage them in the service of the master of the senses. In the conditioned state, the living entity struggles in this material world and engages his senses for material satisfaction. However, if the living entity is graced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can engage these very senses in the service of the Lord. Lord Shiva desires not to be misled by the material senses, but to engage always in the service of the Lord without being subject to contamination by materialistic influences. By the grace and help of Lord Vasudeva, who is all-pervading, one can engage his senses in devotional service without deviation, just as the Lord acts without deviation. So by meditating on the form and the qualities of the Lord, his qualities we also start to acquire. One of such qualities is acting without deviation. As Prabhupada says, just as the Lord acts without deviation, if we meditate upon him, we can also engage our senses in his service without any deviation. In this same set of prayers, when describing the personal beauty of the Lord, again Lord Shiva talks about the abdomen and the navel. Purarechaka samvigna valivalgu dalodharam pratisankramayad vishvam nabhaya varta gabhiraya. So the navel, nabhaya, is being described in a very poetic way. The Lord's abdomen is beautiful due to 3 ripples in the flesh. Being so round, his abdomen resembles the leaf of a banyan tree, and when he exhales and inhales, the movement of the ripples appear very, very beautiful. The coils within the navel of the Lord are so deep that it appears that the entire universe sprouted out of it and yet again wishes to go back. So it's poetically described as to how the universe came out of the Lord's navel, but seeing the beauty, the universe wants to go back into it again. So this is how poetically Lord Shiva is describing, and in this section Prabhupada explains how Lord is a person and Lord Shiva is describing the beauty of the Lord, but many impersonalists who worship Lord Shiva don't acknowledge the personal form of the Lord. So here the devotee of Lord Shiva are not able to understand what Lord Shiva is able to describe and appreciate. As we discussed earlier, he is one of the Sampradaya Acharyas, so he has a perfect understanding and therefore he is describing it in a very poetic way. The whole universe is born out of the lotus stem which sprouted from the navel of the Lord. Lord Brahma sat on the top of this lotus stem to create the whole universe. The navel of the Lord is so deep and coiling that it appears that the whole universe again wants to withdraw into the navel, being attracted by the Lord's beauty. The Lord's navel and the ripples of his belly always increase the beauty of his bodily features. So this is, I found, another description of the navel of the Lord. Following in the footsteps of Radha Vinod Prabhu, I looked at Nectar of Devotion, where the description of the Lord's abdomen is given. When describing the different bodily parts of the Lord, certain parts are thin and certain parts are stout and certain parts are deep. In describing those parts of the body which are deep, the navel is also included. So one of the associates of Nanda Maharaj, so he comes and starts to describe the bodily beauty of Lord Krishna. And this friend of Maharaj Nanda is from a Brahmanical family. So he is describing the beauty of Lord Krishna. So this is Lord Krishna in his boyhood form. So the description goes like this. This boy has a reddish luster in 7 places. His eyes, the ends of his hand, the ends of his legs, his palate, his lips, his tongue and his nails. A reddish luster in these 7 places is considered to be auspicious. 3 parts of his body are very broad. His waist, forehead and chest. 3 parts of his body are short. His neck, thighs and genitals. 3 parts of his body are very deep. His voice, intelligence and navel. There is highness in 5 parts of his body. His nose, arms, ears, foreheads and thighs. In 5 parts of his body there is fineness. His skin, the hairs on his head and the other parts of the body, his teeth and his fingertips. The aggregate of all these bodily features is manifest only in the bodies of great personalities. So here again, these descriptions give a limb by limb description of the Lord and also much more details as seen by the close associates of the Lord. So this friend of Nanda Maharaj wonders how can such a person appear in a Vaishya community, because these marks are seen only by great personalities, and in this section Prabhupada writes as to how Lord Rama appeared in a Kshatriya family, so on and so forth. And this kind of wondrous nature of the Lord, where he transforms himself from Vasudeva and Devaki to Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, and thereby attracting the residents of Vrindavan. So the next theme I just wanted to focus on is the creative energy which is coming from the navel of the Lord. So Lord Brahma, when he came out of the lotus flower and he did not know who he is, what he is supposed to do, thinking that he can figure that out by going into the lotus stem and swimming for many years, he couldn't. Then he gave up that attempt, gave up, as Acharyas described, gave up his pride and surrendered to the Lord, and then started to sit down and meditate. So then the Lord revealed himself to him, and that's where we have this famous set of prayers by Lord Brahma for creative energy, Brahma's prayers for creative energy. In that section, so preceding that section, Lord Brahma takes the darshan of the Lord, and especially it is said that the Lord raises one of his feet and shows that to Lord Brahma. And in that particular section, purport is described as to how Lord Brahma saw Lord Krishna. He was raising one feet and showing that one feet, it is said that's Lord Krishna, and Lord Brahma offers his set of prayers, and Srila Prabhupada quotes from the Gopalatapani Upanishads about how the form which the Lord Brahma saw is Lord Krishna, by quoting this word Gopa Vesha. So in that section of prayers, Lord Brahma will pray and he will acknowledge that the source of all creative energy is coming from the Lord, and then this activity of creation is going to be very passionate, and he asks the Lord to protect him from getting entangled. So he acknowledges that the creative energy is coming from the Lord, and he is going to engage in an activity of creation which involves passion. So therefore, protect me, my Lord, from getting entangled. So this should be the mood as Prabhupada describes in that particular section as to how, for preaching purposes, we deal with various material energies, and one has to be careful. If one is not careful, spiritual life is like walking on the razor's edge, so one may slip and fall down, even if he is in a very exalted position. So in another section where Prabhupada explains that it's not enough that you raise to the spiritual platform, but one has to be careful not to fall down. So we can take lessons from the mood of Lord Brahma, where he is praying that this creative energy is coming from you, you are the source of it. I'm going to use it for your service, but still I might get entangled, so kindly protect me. The creative energy within the devotees, as Prabhupada explains, that one must tax their brains to come up with plans to spread this mission. So in that way, the creative energy is being used in the Lord's service. So those in the renounced order take up the whole society and community as their family, and they use their creative energy to come up with various plans, taxing their brains to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. That's how the creative energy, the virya, vitality, is being used properly. The examples came to my mind are these different campaigns for book distribution. The recent one is the Bhadra campaign. So devotees are sitting and planning. If you see the videos of His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu as to how he comes up with various plans. So that is how the creative energy is being used in the Lord's service by those who are in the renounced order or those who are very highly advanced. The other way of using creative energy is through procreation by raising Krishna conscious children, and that's also considered as a sacrifice, and through that way also the creative energy is properly used in Lord's service. So with this I'll conclude. I'll see if there are any corrections, comments, questions. Okay, there are no questions. We'll conclude here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.